Let's take a scenario where we have a one Kafka topic and we have three producers that are publishing to that topic. And also the volume of the data that we are publishing to that topic may increase. For example, today if we are publishing 1,000 messages, tomorrow it may increase to 2,000, 10,000, and so on. So how we can horizontally scale this topic, right? What would be the logical way to do that? Let's pause for a second and think about that. How would you do that? How would you do that if you design Kafka from the scratch, right? The way Kafka does it is, the way it's done in Kafka, the topic is partitioned, right? It's just that we partition that to three different partitions. So, for example, in this case, we partitioned that to three different partitions, and by the default, Kafka distribute messages across partitions in the round-robin manner. So what it means is, if we, let's say that we receive 10,000 messages, 350 will go to first partition, 350 to second partition, and so on. So that's how we scale from the producer side, right? So we are producing more messages and we are partitioning our topic to as many partitions as we need for our case. That's how we scale horizontally in Kafka. Also, in Kafka, if we want messages from a certain producer go to exactly the same partition, in that case we are using a key. When we are sending a message to Kafka, we are sending not just a message, we are sending a key and the value, right? Key of that message and value of that message. If we want that the messages from the same producer or two or three different producer end up in the same partition, so we need to send the messages with the same key. So for example, in this case, let's say we have a key 0, key 1, and the key 2, right? So if we are producing messages only with these three keys, they will be distributed, these messages with the key 0 will go to the first partition, key 1 to the second partition, and the key 2 will go to the third partition. So now let's go and see that that's how we scale from the producer side. But how about from the consumer side? How we can consume messages, how we can scale from the consumer side. From the consumer side, what we do is we are creating a consumer group, and in the consumer group, for example, in this case, in our consumer group, we have only two consumers, right? We have only two consumers, so what it means is messages from the partition 1 and the partition 2 will go to the first consumer, and from the partition 3, it will go to the second consumer. If, let's say that we want to process messages even faster, so what we do is we are creating one consumer for each partition, right? Again, it's very logical, right? If you look at it, if you even, let's say that designing Kafka from the scratch, that's how you would exactly design that, right? So you would divide your topic into partitions, and from the consumer side, if you want to consume the messages faster, then in that case you are just creating a new consumer in your consumer group. So about the replication, so we talked about that we have a topic, and if we want to horizontally scale that, we are dividing that into partitions. And how about the replication, right? So if we want to keep the data integrity, so what it means is we have only one broker in this case, right? And if the broker is down for some reason, then in that case messages are lost. So in order to avoid it, in Kafka we are using replication. So what replication is we have a leader, and we are leader broker, which is receiving messages and from where the messages are consumed, but we have also follower partition. So we are defining the replication factor when we are creating a topic. So what it means is, let's say we want to that specific topic, that specific partition to be replicated in at least two brokers. So for example, in this case, we have three brokers, and each partition is replicated in three brokers. So let's say that if our leader is gone in this case, if our leader is down, then in that case, what Kafka does is Kafka promotes one of the followers to the leader, and we are adding more we are adding more broker in order to keep the replication factor active, right? If our replication factor is 3, so for example, in this case, one broker is missing. Usually that is done by Zookeeper. Zookeeper is promoting a new broker to a leader. And now let's go and see the Java example. In this Java example, what we do is we are creating one topic. Let's call it partitioned topic, right? So we are creating a partitioned topic, and we have here 3 partitions. We are setting when we create a topic, so we can define the number of the partitions, then we can increase the number of the partitions and so on. And also in my case, I'm defining the replication factor as 1 because I have only one machine, one broker, my local machine. That's why I am defining the replication factor as 1. So the topic is already created. I have already created the topic. In this example, what we are going to do, we are going to have 2 consumers, right? In the same consumer group, my first group, and what we do is if we start 2 consumers, right, consumer 1 and consumer 2, they are exactly the same consumers. Well, we are going to start 2 consumers, right? Consumer 1 and the consumer 2. And also what we do is from the producer side, we are going to publish to that topic, right, to that partition topic, we are going to publish messages with the 3 different keys, key underscore 0, key underscore 1, and the key underscore 2. So what's going to happen is if we send the messages with 3 different keys, so which means that, and we have 2 different consumers, right? So which means that the first consumer or the second consumer, doesn't matter, in that consumer group will consume messages from the first partition, because from here messages will go to 3 different partitions, right? Key 0 will go to first partition, key 1 will go to second, and the key 2 will go third partition. Since we have 3 partitions, the first one will consume from the 2 partitions, and the second one will consume from 1 partition, right? Let's go and test it. So let's start our first consumer. So first consumer is started. Now let's start our second consumer. Second consumer also started, and now let's produce our messages, right? So let's produce our messages and see that in action. So we are producing messages. As you can see here, we produce 10 messages with the key 1, 0, and the 2. So these messages should end up in the consumer 2 of the, so this will go to the first partition because messages with the same key go to the same partition. This will go to the second partition, and this will go to the third partition. So the order is not exact, but they will go to different partitions. So if we go to the consumer, consumer 1, we can see here that this consumer only received messages from the first partition, right? From the first partition with the key 0. That's how exactly we expected it to be. And the second one, the consumer 2, it received messages from the second partition and the third partition. If we want to scale further, so what we can do is we can add one more partition. In that case, let's take a simple consumer 3, and in that case, the messages from the 0 will go to the, again, from the 0 will go to the first one, from the first will go to the consumer 2, and from the second key with the keys from the partition 3 will go to the third consumer.